and he was 22. He
It's
got
better
his,
than getting COVID.
It sure is. Absolutely.
I got my second shot on March 4th, and this past weekend I got side effects, flu, aches, and all that.
Wow.
Weird.
Wow. It's a little delayed reaction, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, anyway, things look like they're starting to look up a little bit, which is good.
well, it's spring today.
Yeah,
It
Yeah.
is the first day of spring.
first day of spring. That's very nice. I like that. It's very nice out.
So
Beautiful.
I hear.
Yeah. Yesterday was a little difficult to walk around because there were big piles of snow on sidewalks, but today it's probably all gone because it's in the 60s.
It'll be back tomorrow.
Hey, Les, what's with the scamming of the state election down there with Mr. Rodriguez, who suddenly was placed on a ballot when he didn't belong on a ballot?
You know, Ray, I hate to tell you this, but I'm not cognizant of that. I try to avoid the news these days. I get all the news I want from Heather Cox Richardson, period.
Well, the district attorney in Florida said it's not illegal to run unless you're being paid to do so.
Why do all you Denver peoples know more about Florida than I do?
We have nothing better to do.
That's right. I don't have to avoid walking in snow. I have to avoid tripping in my pool. Sorry.
I like Paul Simon's line better. I get all the news I need from the weather report.
That too, but who needs a weather report in Florida?
During
I
hurricane.
like Paul Simon.
Same old, huh? Rabbi
So,
Kaye?
here's what it looks like outside today.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, nice. Looks like a
Doesn't look
patio.
any better than here.
Oh, that's very nice. We'll be there in 4 hours.
And you're always welcome, you know that.
Yeah, I know.
You know, one day, Les, you should do the class from your pool. You know, make us really feel bad.
Or I'll go outside. I'll do it out there.
Oh my God!
Why not? It's a
Sure,
beautiful
why
hot day.
Yeah.
Wow, what I started. Ooh.
You're all going to be jealous now, huh?
Where in Florida is it?
I still remember the funniest thing Les ever said.
What's that?
He said, "I'm a urologist, but don't tell my mother. She thinks I'm a brain surgeon."
That's true. I said that. You have a way of remembering those things, Ray, that's kind of annoying.
I just thought it was hysterical.
Now that's a good background.
The palm trees, yeah.
I could put my palm trees back, but they're fake.
These aren't fake,
Well, they're not fake,
as
but
you probably
they're
know.
really, I'm not really there.
Anyway, it's
That's
nice to be outside.
That's
You
very
should
nice.
try it. You guys should try it.
It'll be beautiful here today.
Rabbi Kaye, you're not saying anything.
Oh, Rabbi Kaye gets to Florida often enough.
I'm just waiting for the Rockies to come out, you know.
Oh yeah.
I don't like what they're offering for the season ticket holders. Too
Oh,
weird.
my God.
Seats of 4 here and seats of 2 here, and you gotta find your new place to sit. And
An opening day, the starting price for a good seat is $300, $275, something like that.
Last season, It was so bad, one game, 10 cutouts walked out.
Yeah,
The Rockies should pay the fans to come to the game.
yeah. Right.
Thanks, Les.
But Steve Tick, how about them Nuggets?
Why am I muted, somebody?
I'm not following them this year. How
You're
are they doing?
kidding.
No.
It's like 7 out of the last 8 games they won.
Wow.
Wow. That game last night was tremendous. Well, anyway. So here we are, boys and girls. It's good to see everybody this morning. Let's see, in the last, Rabbi Kaye, you have anything you want to pop in with?
I just want to say I'm glad it's Shabbos.
Been a long week.
Longer than most, but I thought it was a fascinating week to watch our vice president come to Colorado and for various, not getting into details, but to spend some time as watch this unfold and all that was involved with it. And she's a fascinating woman, and she ended up she was going to do small business people, and she ended up choosing, or her staff chose, Maria Empanadas, which is on their best store is on Mississippi and Broadway, but they have a store on Bellevue near the Pancake House. It's closed right now. And she and her husband came from Argentina, and they're Jewish. And their son's being bar mitzvahed in 3 weeks. And she tells the story of making the empanadas. I've known the story for a long time, making the empanadas in her kitchen and having to make a decision about paying certain utility bills and that, starting the business. Her husband's her partner, she runs the business, and they've expanded to 5 stores. And she really told the story of a immigrant woman who happens to be Jewish to a woman who is married to a Jewish man. And it was very fascinating to hear the whole story and listen to her unfold, and then see the second gentleman go off the Rosenbergs, because during the campaign, the guy who owns Rosenberg's reached out to the second gentleman. They created a relationship. So he said when he came to Denver, he'd go there. So fascinating. The news was so caught up in the snowstorm, it didn't do a whole lot about this, but it was a historic moment. It was her first trip outside of DC. She went to Vegas first and then came here, but it was a fascinating visit to watch it unfold, and that she's as real as she is real. When you get up close and personal, you get to listen to her and
Nice.
have that. So it was an interesting historic moment in Denver. I mean, again,
Nice.
that kind of stuff. And then, so been an interesting week, and Passover is almost here. And do you know that it's hard to find smelt matzah in Colorado? They sell it in other stores, but but if you, it's hard matzah to find.
What kind of matzah?
Smelt matzah that's made with smelt, S-M-E-L-T, I think it's smelt. Different.
Why do you want that? Is it something special?
The grain smelt?
Yeah.
The King Supers at Leedsdale and near Leedsdale and Monaco.
Nope, and nor the Bellevue one. It's a unique matzah for people who are what do you call it? Don't
Gluten sensitive.
eat wheat, gluten, and stuff like that. It's an interesting process.
I think it's called spelt with a P.
Spelt, yeah, that's spelt. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, spelt.
Whatever. You can't
Yes,
find
it
it
is
here in
spelt.
Colorado. You got to get it imported.
But the thing is, spelt is one of the 5 ingredients you're not supposed to eat on Pesach. So
Yeah, there's kosher Passover matzahs. But guess what? I'm going out to Cherry Creek sometime this week to do my gefilte fishing.
I'll bet you can find it on Amazon, can't you, Rabbi?
Yeah, but guess what? You only do X for friends. You say, I'll look 3 stores. After that, you bring your own.
The Shmura matzah was available until
Shmura matzah is a brick. But if anyone wants to go to Cherry Creek Reservoir with me for my annual tule to look for gefilte fish, I cast a line and I look for it. the ranger asked me what I'm doing. I say, I'm going gefilte fishing. He says, what's that? Trying to explain it. It's a very funny story, you know?
Does it require a special license?
Yeah. You know, Kathy, it's like when people sit next to me on the plane, this is before the days of having your headsets, everyone put it on and say, what do you do for a living? I said, I'll tell you what I do for a living, but you won't believe me. And they said, what do you do? I say, I buy and sell elephants. And then I have a whole story about that. So it's the same good elephant story.
So
My grandmother.
in order to catch a gefilte fish, I assume that the bait you use is a carrot.
Yeah. But Rabbi's wearing, I'm so machmir during Passover, I clean the cookies from my computer.
Oh.
But with that, I'm good. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, Rabbi, my father and grandfather used to go fishing there, in Lake Michigan. And what they didn't have for fish fry, because, it's the Midwest, my grandmother would make gefilte fish out of it. So a lot of times they had trout gefilte fish instead of carp. It was I think it tasted better.
Trout gefilte fish. Well,
it was leftover, and my grandmother wasn't going to waste it. So.
Anything would taste better than Manischewitz. I don't know how they figured out that recipe. Whew. Anyway, when you grow up Sephardic, you don't eat gefilte fish.
Did you hear about Did you hear about the two fish that were playing with somebody's wallet that fell into their pond, and they were pushing it back and forth with their snouts? And someone looked down and said, "That's the first case of carp to carp walleting I've seen."
Yeah, we didn't have gefilte fish growing up. We had pescado con limón, which is fish in a lemon sauce. It usually was cod or halibut in a lemon sauce. It was absolutely to die for. And my grandmother used to only make it on Pesach. And that's why we always got to the Seder early, because if you missed the first course, you didn't get any more for another year. And that would have been not pescado, that would have been a pescada, a sin. So anyway, so here we are. Last week we finished Demons and Angels, and this week I think we're on 18. We're still dealing with prophets, and the real question is, how do you tell who's a false prophet and who's not a false prophet? And one of the problems here is that a prophet does not predict the future. Any prophet who predicts the future is not a prophet. A prophet prophesies through causality. Prophecy is based on cause and effect. A prophet always says, if, then. So prophets are event driven, based on the actions of the people themselves. If you obey the laws, then you will be safe. If you don't obey the laws, if you worship false gods, if you do this, if you do that, if you do not hearken to my word, then such and such bad will happen, and you will go into exile, and there is no help and no hope for you. But a prophet who comes and says, tomorrow this will happen, or 3 weeks from today this will happen, or bet on maiden voyager in the fourth at Hialeah. That's not a prophet, and that's not what a prophet does. So that's what soothsayers do. That's what omen readers do. That's what fortune tellers do. That's not what a prophet does. And so the question is, how do you tell who is a prophet? And the answer is, strangely, anyone whose words come to pass is a prophet. So you don't know who a prophet is until after the fact. So how are you supposed to tell who is a righteous prophet and who is a fake prophet? We're faced here with a catch-22 that really is difficult to resolve, if not impossible to resolve. So the Torah kind of tries its best to give us an indication of who a prophet is going to be. So Torah says, first of all, false prophets, you got to kill. You got to get rid of them because, you know, they're like fake news.
Okay.
And you can't tolerate that. They destroy society. But there will come a time when a prophet will arise, because that's what verse 18 says. I will, wherever verse 18 is, move it up to 18:18. Thanks. Navi akim lahem mikerev achichem. Should be achechem. It is achechem. Kamocha. I will raise up a prophet for you, mikerev achechem, from the midst of your people. Kamocha, like you. So one wonders, like, what does that mean, like you? I'm going to make a prophet who's going to be just like you because he's going to be from the midst of your people, or like Moses. Hard to tell what it's all about, and the commentators are not helpful. V'natati devarai b'fiv, and I will place my words in his mouth. V'diber aleichem, and he shall speak to you et kol asher atzavenu. He will speak to you all that I command him. So I'm going to raise up a prophet. There will be a prophet from among your people who's going to be just a regular person like you. I'm going to put my words in his mouth, and he's going to speak what I command him to speak. So the Midrash on this says that, does God really put words in someone's mouth? And the Midrash says, no, God no longer speaks to people. So consequently, who's going to put the words in this prophet's mouth? It's going to be an angel who is sent by God. That's a Midrash. You have to have 15 degrees of separation to be able to get around all of the, you have to go through a lot of contortions to get around the stumbling blocks that have been placed here. Get rid of false prophets. You won't ever know who is a real prophet until his prophecy comes to pass. Therefore, you're going to have to wait for the prophecy to come to pass, which may take many years, and then you'll know he was a real prophet. Otherwise, you have to get rid of him. It's a real conundrum. So then 19 comes along and says,
I have a question.
Pardon?
I have a question.
Sure, David.
Eliyahu Hanavi, he predict the future because we believe that Eliyahu would tell us when the Messiah would come, isn't it?
Well, he would be the precursor, but he didn't predict who it would be. So you'd have to wait for Eliyahu to come back. And the reason why we know that Elijah would be a prophet is because an unusual event took place that set him apart from everyone else. Because the Midrash says that you will also know a sign of being a prophet is that an unusual event takes place. And of course, Elijah ascended in a flaming chariot, which is pretty unusual. Unless, of course, you consider a rocket ship to Mars a flaming, fiery chariot, or a rocket to the moon could also be considered a fiery chariot. So we could have 7 new prophets after the next launch to the moon, if that's the case. But Elijah is certainly an unusual character, and so was Elisha. They both had unusual experiences. Elisha raised the dead, and multiplied oil for a poor woman, and so on and so forth. So 19 comes along and says, "Vayahish asher lo yishama," and it shall be the man who someone doesn't listen to. If anyone, I guess that would be a better translation. If anyone doesn't listen, el davarai, to my words, asher yadaber b'shmi, which this prophet shall speak in my name, anochi edrosh me'imo, I shall edrosh me'imo, I shall investigate him. I shall call him to account. That's good. I shall hold him responsible. That's sort of tortuous Hebrew, but it works. So once you know that there is a real prophet who comes to prophesy my words, the words which I commanded him, either through myself or through an angel, you better listen to him, because he's speaking in my name. And then to protect oneself against the wrong person speaking in God's name comes the last verse, or next to last verse of chapter 18. And with this verse, we have the whole list of conundrums. But Hanavi asher yazid ledaber devar b'shmi. The prophet, why are they calling him the prophet here? They should say Ha'ish, the man. Hanavi, the guy who presumes to be a prophet, who yazid, who has the chutzpah, who is presumptuous to speak a word in my name, et asher lo tzivitiv, which I did not command him, ledaber, to speak, v'asher yedaber b'shem Elohim acherim, or one who speaks words that were given to him by other gods, meitanaviyahu, let him die. In other words, I'm going to raise up a prophet. You won't know who this prophet is until his words come true. I'm going to put words in his mouth, except I won't put words in his mouth. Maybe an angel will. And if you failed to listen to his words, then I will call you to account. But if a prophet comes and speaks in my name, that which I didn't give him to speak, or if he speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet has to be put to death. Whoa. this is really complicated. And now we get to the end of chapter 18. And the reason why we're sort of going through it, we'll do the questions and stuff afterwards, is because all of these verses kind of fit together. You need each one of them to balance the others. So verse 21 comes along and it says, oh, that's right, there's 22 also. V'chi tomar b'levavecha, and if you should ask in your heart, Echa neida et hadavar asher lo dibro Adonai, and perhaps you'll ask yourself in your heart, b'levavecha, how will I know that which wasn't spoken by God? Right? Because you got to put the false prophet to death. How will I know that this guy isn't that this is fake news? How will I know? And then verse 22, Asher yedaber hanavi b'shem Adonai v'lo yiyeh hadavar v'lo yavohu hadavar asher lo dibro Adonai b'zadon divro hanavi lo tagur mimenu. Whoa. So if a prophet speaks in God's name and his prophecy lo yavo doesn't come about, hadavar asher lo yid, that oracle, that prophecy was not spoken by God. And the prophet has presumed upon himself to speak these words. They aren't divine words. They're his invention. Lo tagur mimenu. Do not tagur. Tagur means you shall dwell. I don't know why this word was used. Lo tagur mimenu. Don't cower before him. Don't be, it really should be, don't be fearful of him. And I would have used a different word were I writing the Bible, but they never asked me. So do not stand in dread of him. I don't know if that's a good translation.
Yeah, that's one of the third definition is to fear, be afraid, be in awe.
Yeah, tagur here is to be afraid.
Yeah.
Rabbi?
That's what Safaria gives as a definition.
Oh, yeah, because that was the English translation, but that's not really it's really not the.
I am sure you're right.
See, it really means to live or to dwell or to.
Yeah, that's the first definition.
To inhabit is really what it is. Tagur is to inhabit. So that's why it's a weird word here. And so now the question is, if it was call, it would be Tagor, but it's Tagur, which is a strange, it's a strange verbal form. It could be PL. And if it's PL, okay, so there are 7 verbal forms in Hebrew. PL is the 3rd, and Hitpael is the 7th. Hitpael is reflexive, and then it would be hitager, or hitager it would be. So reflexively, the word tagur could mean to be in awe or to dread. PL is sort of the semi-causative form. So I guess they, in Hebrew, I don't know, David, you'd have to be the expert on this, because I don't know how the usage in Israel would be. But I guess if hitpael means to dread, then PL might mean to be in awe. But I sure don't know.
To me, the word tagur here doesn't make any sense. Tagur is to live.
Thank you. I rest my case. I have no idea why they picked tagur as a word. It just makes no sense. That is like scratching your left ear with your right hand.
Rabbi?
Yeah. Steve?
As we discussed years ago when we were at Mount Sinai, there is no provision of the Torah that upsets me more than this.
Okay.
And stated most simply, if God came to Mount Sinai, to Temple Sinai to speak, and the board of directors, being the elders, went up to Rabbi Rines and said, tell God to stop speaking to the congregation because they were afraid of God. And Rabbi Rines went to God and told him, stop communicating with the congregation. I would never speak to the board of directors or Rabbi Rines again. To have folks interfere in the relationship between God and the people is so terrible to me as to be unspeakable. And it makes me think that there's something cynical about this. But that is not the relationship that we all believe that we have. We believe that when we're in the mood to try to talk to God, we believe we can have a relationship. Yet this sets up others between us. It's not who we are, and it infuriates me.
Well, so yeah, I understand what you're saying. So here's the problem. Before this, the people were told, whatever you do, don't consort with fortune tellers, carnival, barkers, omen tellers, necromancers. In other words, stay away from all the wackadoodles who are telling you what God wants from you. Stay away from the people who are reading goat entrails to predict the future. Stay away from fortune tellers. Stay away from crystal ball lookers. Stay away from seance conductors. Only listen to a prophet. Well, once you say listen to a prophet, now you have to define who is a prophet. Well, you can't define who is a prophet because prophets usually just stand up and say, I am a prophet and here's God's word. So now you're in a problem. And the problem is, what if it isn't a prophet? What if it's a phony?
Rabbi, my problem is verse 17.
Okay.
My English translation says, whereupon the Lord said to me, they have done well in speaking thus. Well, why, Lord? Come on, what is that?
Okay, you have to read 16 first. So the people were overwhelmed when God spoke to them, right? And so therefore Moses is chosen as the intermediary to speak for God. They not only couldn't listen any longer because they were frightened. So Moses became the intermediary, but Moses isn't going to live forever. So now the people say, well, who's going to speak to us after Moses is gone? And God says, I'll send you a prophet, and it'll be from among your people. And Rabbi Rines will tell you who he is. I mean, I don't know what else.
I think you're dancing. I want to know why it is that God and Rabbi Rines didn't say to the elders, chill out. Just stop being afraid. God wants to speak to you. Why would you possibly want to not have a relationship with God? It makes no sense to me, and it angers me.
So how would you deal with the expression "et la sot l'Adonai heferu Torato"? When it's time to act on behalf of God, they abort his Torah.
I think you're over my head.
Well, so that's a principle, a Jewish principle, that the needs of human beings sometimes overwhelm the needs of obeying the laws of a Torah. How is that? Let me give you the easiest example of that. You're starving to death during the Holocaust. You're starving to death. You have not eaten in over a week or so, and suddenly someone offers you a piece of horse meat. It's against the Torah. Et la sot. When it's time to save a life, you have to do, even if it abridges the Torah. The same thing with laws of Shabbat. They put to death a guy who gathered sticks on the Sabbath. But if it's a time to save someone's life, the laws of the Sabbath don't apply any longer. You have to go save a life. If you have to drive to save a life, you drive to save a life. That takes precedence. So, et la sot l'Adonai, when it's time to do that which is godly, forget the laws of Torah, go do it, and then come back and worry about the laws of Torah. So here's a person who comes along and says, I'm a prophet. And God sent me to tell you that this is what you should do. And the people look at him and say, if we do that, we will be going down the wrong road. Our society will go absolutely wrong. We can't listen to this guy. So now what do? Well, now what you do is you put his words in abeyance and you wait to see if they really come true before you go follow him down that road. And if they really do come true, then he's a prophet. And if they don't come true, then he's dead. Because he had the temerity to rise up and say, this is what God wants, when that wasn't in fact what God wanted. So I think revelation is onerous. And it comes with a warning. If I tell you the truth, I might have to kill you, right? Right? it's like, it's like Rabbi Kaye, the elephant salesman. I sent around a thing a couple of days ago with a picture of an elephant laying down on its side, and a guy with a manual in his hand leaning against the elephant. And in the cartoon on the bottom says, he just bought the elephant and he's reading the instruction manual, which I thought was hysterical at the time. And so, Torah is, on the one hand, says, I'm not leaving you, I'm not abandoning you, I'll send you a prophet. But sometimes people, knowing that I'm going to send you a prophet, rise up and take it upon themselves to say, hey, you know what? I'm a prophet, when in fact they aren't a prophet. And those people can't be tolerated in a society because they could lead you astray. So you have to be extremely cautious. That's why these last 5 verses are really a catch-22. You're sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you believe this guy that he's a prophet and suddenly what he says doesn't materialize, then you've been a fool. And if you don't believe him and it does materialize, then you've been a fool. How do you know if he's a prophet or not a prophet? And there is no answer. The only answer is you got to wait until his predictions come true. And no prophet predicts except through causality. So a prophet who comes and says, the stock market's going up tomorrow is not a prophet. If he's going to be a prophet, he's going to say, if we have a total recovery, the stock market is likely to go up. That may be more prophetic than the other. But even more prophetic than that is, if you all treat each other well and are generous to one another, then the end result might be that the stock market rises. I mean, that's...
I found it interesting, the phrase that the prophet will come from among you. It reminds me of the Simon and Garfunkel song, the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls, tenement halls.
Yeah.
That very interesting connection there, I thought.
That's very good. Yeah.
I'll tell you where you never see a prophet is in Congress.
Yeah.
Suppose the prophet makes a prophecy that comes true. And then next year he comes across with another prophecy. Is it like the guy who bet on all the horses at one race and then he had a winner so he could bet, et cetera, et cetera? How do you know the next time that he's a prophet?
I guess you could say, well, he had a good year.
I don't know.
In the Bible, most prophets only came around once. That is, they only had one prophecy. They were a one-trick pony, so to speak. And if they were pre-exilic prophets, that is before the exile, then their message really was shape up or ship out. And if they were exilic prophets, their message was, you've done bad, you've been punished, things are going to get better. And if they're post-exilic prophets, that is, prophets who come to preach to the people after they've come back to Israel, then their message is, you're suffering because you came back in small numbers, you've inherited a land that has been salted, you're working your tail off, have hope, things will get better. And in fact, things will become glorious. So it depends on when the prophet prophesied, but he's only a one-trick pony. He's not coming back over and over again to give different messages to the people. His message is singular. And that's true with the major prophets like Jeremiah, Ezekiel, or Isaiah, or first Isaiah. And it's true of all the minor prophets as well. They got one thing to say and they say it pretty well, and then they're gone.
I was thinking about Steve's question, and I'm wondering if, and maybe seeing it a little bit differently than Steve, but Steve, correct me if I'm in the weeds. I don't necessarily see prophets standing between people and God in terms of conversations, but I wonder if prophets look at God's word, if you will, and they become guideposts, and they're aware of the laws and they're aware of what the expectations are. And it's like, remember, if you do this, this could happen. So, but if you do this, then this.
Can I answer?
Yeah, please. It's a
Well, in the story, God was talking to the people. And the elders went to Moses and said, tell God to stop talking to the people. Stop having a relationship directly with the people, because they're afraid. And rather than the story being, which I of course would much prefer, stop being afraid. Stop being afraid. There's nothing to be afraid about. Have a relationship with God. It's no, the people don't have a relationship with God. God will speak through others, not with people directly.
What's the downside of all the people listening to God?
There'll be all these different interpretations of what God is saying.
But
oh, come on.
And then there's no way of diffusing it. Everybody comes along and says, this is what God said. That's what God said. That's what God said. This is what God meant. This is what God said. And that's why he meant this, that, the other thing. And the next thing you know, you got all these people who've heard God's word, but there's no filter.
Why don't we have that with the 10 Commandments?
Well, but they're written down. God speaks, the interpretation. Somebody doesn't hear so well out of one ear. They only get half a message, and they go running off half-cocked thinking that they got the whole message. Someone's a little bit old and a little farkeret. Someone's a little bit young and is thinking about it with hormonally instead of mentally.
Why should God think it's good that we don't want to hear God because we're afraid of God? Why is that good?
Rabbi, Steve, when all that happened, there was a whole bunch of unexplained noise and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think it meant not to speak to God. I think at that moment where they were told not to go to the mountain, where they were told they would be killed, where there was all this explosion and fire and all this other stuff, that was a little overwhelming. But that's not how it's communicated as you move further on through Torah, through the other writings in Torah. And I think it may have been just that experience of all that noise and stuff going on at that time. At least that's how I always felt. I never felt that it was a wall. I felt that it was part of that initial experience. My take on it.
Let's talk about a prophet for a minute. The word Navi is a bizarre word. Just a bizarre word. Because we don't know what the root of the word is. The root of the word just could be bo, which means to come. Bohena, come here. Navi, one who came to the people. That might be it. Navua, prophecy, could be from the word bua, not just bow, but bua. And in Hebrew, there's an interesting word that is like bua bua or abua, which means a blister, from whence we get the English word boo-boo, which is true, by the way. So abua is a blister, and prophecy is like a swelling up, a blistering, an eruption, a festering. A prophet is so filled with a message that he cannot contain himself. He can't escape the mission. He's not a con man. He's naive, actually. He's not sophisticated. He's well, like Amos, for instance. So the setup in the book of Amos, which is a phenomenal 9 chapters, by the way, if you got nothing better to read sometime, the book of Amos is fascinating. So the book of Amos starts with the words, he was a herdsman and a dresser of sycamore trees, whatever that means. I guess the fruit of sycamore trees he fed to his cattle, but he was a herdsman, a dresser of sycamore trees. This is not a rocket scientist. This is a man of the fields. Elijah is a man of the fields. Elisha was taken to be a prophet when he was harvesting a field with a team of oxen. So prophets, by and large, are not really sophisticated. Isaiah may have been the most sophisticated of the prophets. Jeremiah is a kid. He's a youngster, and he says when he hears the word that he has to prophesy, he says, Na'ar Anochi, I'm a teenager. What do you want from my life? And God says, I knew you when you were formed in the womb, buddy. You're going to go to the people and talk to them. So the prophets are rough-hewn individuals who just fester with one message, and they have to give it. They have no choice. They have to give it. And I have a funny feeling that in biblical times, you might have more of an indication of who a prophet was than you would with layers and layers and layers of civilized sophistication heaped upon generation after generation. I think you're talking about naive, unsophisticated, unworldly people who come up and preach out of the core of their being because they have no choice but to do so. And they risk their lives to do it. I mean, when Amos goes to the northern kingdom, even though he's from the south, and he goes into the court, the palace of the king, and Amaziah, the priest, comes to the king and says, there's a guy out there speaking sedition. He's saying that God's going to destroy Israel if we don't change our ways. And Jeroboam, the king, says, tell him to get out of here. And Amaziah, the high priest, goes and he says, hey, you prophet, go back and preach in your own country. Go back to Judah. You don't belong here. And Amos says, Lo navi v'lo ben navi anochi. I am not a prophet, and I'm not the son of a prophet. I was given this message, and I'm going to speak it. And that's the prophet, and that's and he could have been killed. Jeremiah could have been killed. They put him in a pit to keep him quiet, but he was taken out of the pit by friends, colleagues, and Jeremiah couldn't be stopped. That Baruch was writing his words down. He had a scribe, and the king took a fire brazier, a barbecue, and burned the words that were written down by the prophet, that by Baruch, his secretary. And Jeremiah turns it all around, and he says, you burned God's words in a brazier, and now God will turn Jerusalem into a brazier. Right?
Rabbi, was Jonah considered a prophet? Because Jonah's prediction didn't come true because everything changed.
Yeah, that's why Jonah was so resistant. He knew that God's words were true. He didn't want to be the guy who went to the enemy of Israel and told them to stop acting so terribly, because if they repent and stop acting terribly, then Nineveh won't fall. This is the enemy of Israel. Jonah didn't want Nineveh to succeed. Jonah wanted Nineveh to fall. So he said, don't send me. I'm out of here. I think we learned from the book of Jonah that you shouldn't send a depressive person to be a prophet. If you read the book of Jonah carefully, which is really also an interesting read, everything in the book of Jonah is down. Jonah goes down to the sea. He goes down into a ship. He goes down into the bottom of the ship. He falls down into a deep sleep. He is brought up to the deck. He says to the people, throw me down into the ocean. They throw him down into the ocean. He's swallowed up down into the belly of a fish. I mean, he sits under a booth. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. And the whole book of Jonah is like a downer. And Jonah himself is kind of a downer because he's on a mission that he cannot win, because if he succeeds, he gives his enemy a leg up. And if he fails, then he's not a prophet. So this is a lose-lose situation for Jonah. And no wonder he's depressive. Somebody else had a comment. No? Okay. Are there any prophets in our day?
Besides Q? Q keeps, or the people around Q keep changing the prophecy. Well, it wasn't January 6th. So now it's going to be March 4th. No, it's going to be March 20th.
Well, that's not prophecy. That's prediction.
You're right. You're right. Sorry.
Yeah. They really don't say this is what God wants. They really say this is what will happen, because if you believe in me, then that will happen. And, you know, that's so spurious. I was thinking of starting a group. You know, if Q worked, why wouldn't Z work? I'd fund it by coming up with a couple of different designs for the letter Z, which you know, is kind of nice. If you turn it on its side, it also appeals to the N people. You know, if you round the corners and turn it backwards, it's sort of an S. So Z has a lot of appeal, and I thought I'd make little wooden things and I'd gild them, say 10%, you know, gold or something, and we could sell them for $50 a piece, and people could, you know, have these things on their doorposts, and so I could fund the whole movement. You know, it would be kind of nice. Maybe in another life, I'll do something like that.
Well, I've got some crystals you could glue on them and make them all sparkly.
Oh yeah. Oh, sequins are big. Sequins.
No, crystals, actual like, you know, flattened diamonds kind of thing.
Oh, you mean like
Swarovski.
You could do healing with the Z.
There you go. You know, or make these long wands and you could pop each other on the head with them.
Yeah. No, any of these suggestions are really good.
Bloggers are also lifted to the status of prophets for some people. Bloggers, people with YouTube channels. It depends who you're listening to. I've gotten, you got to watch this, Andrea, and I watch it and I'm thinking, what kind of idiocy am I listening to? But the person who sent it totally believes what this person is saying.
Frightening, isn't it? Oh, it's really frightening because there seems to be less and less psychic distance between a word and what is truth. Reality sort of disappears in the world of social media, and it's replaced by rumor, and that's frightening. I mean, I have never done social media. I wouldn't even know how to get on Facebook. I once made a terrible mistake. I said okay years ago to a guy who invited me to go on LinkedIn. So he said, can I put you on my link? I didn't know what he was talking about, but he was a nice friend. So I said, yeah, sure, whatever that means. The next thing I know, I got 900 things from LinkedIn. So, hey, leave me alone. I don't want any part of it. But even to this day, I still get 4 or 5 invitations from people I never knew, never wanted to know, don't care much for, who want me to go on their LinkedIn page. And I don't know how to get off it. So I just ignore it. So, but, and that makes me a Luddite, I guess. Probably a big time Luddite. But I've never really felt I've missed much by not being on social media, except a whole lot of rumors and a whole lot of stuff. I really don't need to see everybody's new toy, every diaper change, every little ceremony. I don't need to spend my life doing that. So I don't think I've missed that much, but maybe I'm wrong. Okay, if you want, we can. One thing. There was an article this week or last about a Moses Herman Shapira, who in 1888 or 1868, somewhere in there, discovered an ancient manuscript that he said was the earliest version of the book of Deuteronomy. And he gave it to the British Museum. The British Museum was in the process of validating it as truly an authentic document. It was in pieces, small pieces, large pieces, about 60 or 70 pieces of the book of Deuteronomy. And along came a French scholar who hated Shapira, had a mad on for him. And he wrote a damning article about this being a fake. British Museum refused to buy the manuscript from Shapira. Shapira was so crushed by this negative publicity that he ultimately committed suicide about 6 months later. And the manuscript, except for translations of the fragments, the original disappeared. How anything disappears from the British Museum is truly a puzzle. And the suspicion is that this French guy got a hold of it and never returned it. But no one can say for sure. So 60 years later, an Israeli who's studying in Germany at Potsdam University by the name of Idan Dershowitz is writing a thesis on the book of Deuteronomy, and he comes across a reference to Shapira's discovery. And he starts to investigate these fragments that were this codex that was uncovered by him and went to the British Museum. And he has several translations by scholars of the time, because let's face it, in the mid 1800s, that was when there was a fervent interest in biblical studies, when the Wissenschaft des Judentums became a special interest of the people of Europe, especially Germany, at the time, when the documentary hypothesis of Wellhausen and Brown, Driver, Briggs, all of those guys started to write about the Bible being written in 4 different writers or 4 different groups of writers at 4 different times. And they named these documents J, E, D, and P. And so here's this document, early Deuteronomy, and Shapira dates it around 1000 BCE, 1000 to 800 BCE. So it would precede the writing of Genesis. So this Dershowitz, who is really working hard on it now, says Shapira may very well have been correct. He may have found the earliest version of the book of Deuteronomy, and the difference between that early version and the book of Deuteronomy is that the only laws in the early version are the 10 Commandments, that there are no other laws written in the book. Only the history and words about, like chapter 18, 17 of Deuteronomy, about the way in which a king should act, the way in which a priest should act, the way in which a prophet should act, et cetera, et cetera. And so he's still working on it, Dershowitz. And it'll be interesting to find out what he comes up with in the next couple of years, because this is going to take him many years to work on. But in the meantime, he'll make a career on it. Now, he's had a number of great scholars in Israel, like Professor Gesundheit, believe it or not, that's his name, who's a fabulous scholar at the Hebrew University, who was very cynical about what Dershowitz had come up with. And all of a sudden, after Dershowitz has presented his evidence, Gesundheit has become one of his most fervent supporters, as have a number of scholars from the Hebrew Union College and a couple of other Israeli scholars as well. So it seems to be gaining some traction, and it would be interesting to find out if they could resurrect this document to find out what the difference between, say, Proto-Deuteronomy and Deuteronomy actually becomes.
Well, earlier this week, Rabbi Rhymes' class, either Tuesday or Thursday, and I think there's some people in the class, he talked about this, and Yanni sent us a link. I don't think he's here today, otherwise he would send the link. It's very interesting. And one time I rebutted an editorial in the Jewish News to Gesundheit. And I never heard of a Gesundheit as I thought it was a covered up name or something. And the Jewish News says, you have to give your real name. And it was quite interesting.
Yeah. No, Gesundheit is a very well-respected scholar.
That's what I was told, yeah.
Yeah. Mark?
Who has the ultimate say? Who's like the Supreme Court that decides if somebody by use got changed from its original intent or usefulness? Who says it's okay to change it? It seems to me like the Orthodox people have made that. What do you call it? Well, they have all the control over that, and whatever they say is going to do, no matter if the Orthodox and non-Orthodox people keep doing it the way they were doing it.
Andrea, can you translate?
Yeah, it didn't come through very well.
I have a hard time understanding what Mark said. Somehow that.
Who's the Supreme Court of the decision? I don't know why that. I'm not.
Who would make the decision? Say that Shapira's. Say he was right, and there was a big article in the Jewish News, by the way, on that. That's for the scholars to determine, I assume.
Right. And Mark asked if the Supreme Court would be involved, and
the Jewish Supreme Court, I guess.
Yes, our Sanhedrin.
The Sanhedrin
to make the decision.
I think it would be biblical scholarship, period. First of all, they need to find some of the original document because they have to do carbon dating and make sure that it's, authentic. One of the comments that was made by the French guy, I forget his name, the French guy who said it's a phony, he found a piece of it, a piece of the original document that had been cut away, and on the bottom of the document, not where there was any writing, but in the margin, he said it was cut away, and he thinks that it was cut away in order to be used elsewhere. And Shapira said, no, it was cut away because somehow it had gotten some water damage, and the skin itself had started to puff up. And because of that, they cut away the bottom of it so that the water damage wouldn't spread. So I know exactly what he's talking about, because in Durango, they have a Torah that was in a flood, and the parchment was sitting in water for a couple of days. And then they took it out and they opened it all up and they dried it out. Now, a normal Torah of regulation size weighs about 60 pounds, 40 to 60 pounds, depending on the wood, depending on. So it's a pretty heavy document. This Torah was so heavy I could barely lift it. It must have been 80 pounds. You can't get the water damage out of a scroll. It just won't come out. It swells up the skin so badly. It's still legible, but it swells up so badly that it just adds 30% to the weight of the document. And I went to lift this Torah up, and I thought, my God, you could get a hernia getting this thing out of the ark. It was amazingly heavy. And I take a look at it, and it's the skin itself is just 3 times the size of a normal skin. So I know what water damage looks like, and I can imagine that would have been a good reason to cut out that bottom to keep it from spreading, because the water will just keep spreading until it affects the whole scroll.
Who says the French guy's correct or incorrect?
Well, yeah.
Rabbi, can you hear me? Can you hear me? This is Rita. Can you send us a link?
Oh, can I send you a link? Yeah. Yeah, I could send you a link. If I can remember where I stored it. Yeah, I'll look for it.
I can send a link to you from the Jewish News. It's just a JTA article. So.
Okay, that's good. That's good. That'll be great.
What edition of news was it? Is it a recent, the Jewish News?
Oh God, now we're talking about my distorted COVID time. It was about 2 weeks ago, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Fascinating. It really was a fascinating article.
When was the last time Orthodox halakha was changed for anything? Does it ever happen that modern Jews or Reformed Jews have more influence than we think in the way these people are making decisions?
Well, the interesting thing is that that we're faced here with another dilemma, and that is the recent discovery of 4 Dead Sea Scrolls. The Israeli Department of Archaeology has decided that they're going to double their efforts, quadruple their efforts to examine every possible cave at the Dead Sea above Qumran. Anybody who's been to Qumran understands this is a formidable task, because the hills above Qumran is right at the Dead Sea, and the hills above Qumran are all around the area. That would be equivalent to saying, take 2 miles of the Rocky Mountains, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of caves in all kinds of little crevices and niches in the mountain range. But they're determined to go into every single cave they find, every niche they find, and try to see if there are other scrolls that have been sequestered away. Because when the Romans in the 2nd century came down upon the Essenes, who were essentially scribes, probably monastic scribes, the Essenes decided they had to preserve their writings. Some of their writings were original books, but most of their writings were copies of the prophets. They didn't do much in the way of Torah, but they did a lot of copying of prophetic writings, which is interesting in and of itself. And they wrote on all kinds of materials, but mostly on sheep, except for the copper scroll, which has now taken about 70 years. They're trying to unroll it slowly but surely because the patina has made it stick together, and they're unrolling it like a millimeter a year or something like that, because they have to try to preserve the writing on it. Otherwise, the scroll is of no other value. So now they went into one cave just last week, I guess, and they found about 40 or 50 fragments. Some were written in Greek, which is a little bit strange, and some were written in Aramaic, and I guess a few were written in Hebrew. The reason why it's strange is if this was part of the Essene library, there wouldn't have been any Greek writings, because the Greeks abandoned Israel about 150 before the Common Era, and the Essenes are writing 150, 230, 240, 250 years later. Greek as a language would have been replaced by Latin because the Romans took over, and it would have been replaced by Aramaic because that was the language of the streets, or it would have been replaced by Hebrew if the Essenes thought what they were doing was writing Holy Script. It would not have been replaced by Greek. The only place there was still Greek as the major language would have been Egypt. And why would the Egyptian scribes choose the Dead Sea to preserve their writings? So that leads me to believe that there's something weird going on here, but we'll see how this plays out. Because the next time the Greek is spoken is during the Byzantine period, which is already 500 Common Era, 600 Common Era, when Greek monks come to Israel and start to build monasteries on old Christian sites, 700, 800 Common Era, and the like. The whole Byzantine resurrection of Greek monks takes place. But, the difference between 200 and 600, 700 is enormous. So, yeah.
I dug around on the New York Times, and the article is, I put the link to it on the chat. So if people want to go look for it, it would be easy to find. It's from the New York Times on March 10th, and it's titled, "Is a long dismissed forgery actually the oldest known biblical manuscript?"
Nice.
Fascinating.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I'm confused. Exactly what is the difference between prediction and prophecy?
Yeah, what is? Prediction means this is going to happen next week. And a prophecy is, if you do such and such, in keeping with what God wishes, then such and such will be your fate. I mean, essentially, that's the difference.
Okay, that if you do such and such, that this is going to be your fate. But isn't that the same thing as saying that if you do damage to Asians, for example, you're going to destroy meaningful relationships in the future? Isn't it the same thing?
No, that would be in keeping with prophecy, right? If in fact you create a society that is divisive, and your society cannot stand, that would be more in keeping with prophecy. Prediction would be more like I can't think of something off the top that would be predictive in the same way that it would be prophetic. But prediction is it's going to snow tomorrow.
That it's going to what about?
Snow.
Oh, it has
it's
nothing to
gonna
do.
snow.
A prediction has nothing to do with your behavior. So a prediction is this is going to happen or that's going to happen. It has nothing to do with you, right? It's going to snow tomorrow. It has nothing to do with you.
All right.
Global warming is with us. The hurricanes are going to get bigger and bigger. That has nothing to do with you. That's a prediction. It's not a prophecy. A prophecy would take more of the form of all of you as a society need to do such and such, otherwise such and such will happen, right? If you keep using fossil fuels, the global warming will eventuate, and global warming will bring on such and such. So you bring on your own demise by continuing to act foolishly or wastefully, what have you. Keep throwing plastic in the ocean and the fish will die.
Is part of it that the time is not specified, so you're not stuck with a particular date.
Right.
It's not if you do this on a particular date, this will happen.
Yeah, there's no date. There's no date in prophecy, right? And nobody wants to date a prophet.
It might be annoying.
They usually leave a big tip.
Love me, love my oxen, Yeah, you'd have to take it.
I still go back to the question, who controls the ultimate decisions in Judaic lore or law? Why?
I think it would be, Judaic law, biblical law would enter into it, Talmudic law would enter into it, but I think archaeological evidence would probably be as important, if not more important to begin with. You'd have to verify that this is potentially true for the time and for the circumstances, and that the writing and the formation of letters. Oh yeah, that was one of the things this French guy said. He said the letters looked like they were written first by a right-handed person and then by a left-handed person. Well, back in the day, it was tough to come up with enough skin, because it was very, very difficult to make parchment. And so a piece of parchment was a very valuable thing. So when you're writing, you wanted to make sure you used every possible square inch, millimeter of space, which is why originally Hebrew words were just run right together. There was no space between the words. You just keep writing them. And some say that the reason for final letters was so you'd know where the end of a word was. So now, when a scribe is writing right-handed and he comes to the end of a place and he wants to start a new sentence or a new paragraph or something, he can't just go down and skip a little line and go. So what he might want to do is might want to show that this is where something new begins by tilting the parchment a little bit and writing it on a slant, almost like italics, writing it on a slant, which then would look like he wrote it left-handed. And then he would go on. So this guy comes along and he says, no, left-handed, right-handed, must have been two different scribes, and therefore it's a fake. And he just killed Shapiro's finding, and Shapiro just couldn't stand the humiliation. He killed himself. Weird. Some people take this very seriously, as you can see. Yeah, so I think it's going to be a matter of archaeological evidence, and then ultimately it will devolve to the principles of Talmud to determine well, where we go next.
Will the Orthodox accept geologic evidence?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, archaeological evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything. Yeah. Yeah. And then the study of writing, epigraphy, is its own scientific thing. And I would not hesitate to imagine that artificial intelligence would be used in the analysis of the epigraphy of the scrolls, just like they use artificial intelligence to recognize your signature on the back of a ballot envelope. You know, that's how they essentially scan the envelopes and instantly match your signature against previous signatures.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have reached the witching hour and then some. It's good seeing everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a wonderful Shabbos and a great week, and stay safe and get your shots.
We meeting next week?
Why? Just because it's Pesach, we shouldn't meet?
Yeah, something like that.
Sure.
What? Yes or no?
Chag Sameach to everyone.
Chag Sameach, everybody. Happy Pesach.
Does everybody remember what they did for last year's Pesach?
What?
Remember what they did for last year's Pesach? It's already out of my mind.
Yeah.
Weren't you in lockdown then already?
Well,
we just celebrated the first anniversary of lockdown, and I'm afraid you guys are having daylight saving time already, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why I was an hour too late.
Yeah, we have daylight savings time. Well, actually, Seder night. What is the Seder night? The 27th, 28th?
Saturday night.
27th.
Saturday night.
Friday
27th.
night. Yeah. What date is that?
The 27th.
27th. Okay, that's fine. So the 28th is okay. The 29th is problematic because the 29th is Ricky and my 60th wedding anniversary.
Oh, Mazel Tov.
Mazel Tov.
Mazel Tov. That's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or as Ricky would say, 30 of the greatest years of her life.
Richard used to say that too.
Yeah, right.
So I'm serious. Are we reading next week or not? No.
Yeah, if I think there's got to be a Torah study, so therefore Yoni or somebody's going to have to be working the shtick. So yeah, next week.
Yeah, we'll be on next week, and then the only weeks where we might have to have a conversation are when is the following Saturday, April 3rd, because our Shabbat service begins at 10 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock.
And it's also a Yisker service, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we might have to skip the week after next.
Yanni, can you send that link again on Shapiro?
Sure, that should be in the chat right now, actually.
Oh, okay. You're always ahead of the ball. Thank you.
That was Fern. That was Fern. She beat me to it.
I didn't think you were here today.
Oh yeah, Yoni is always.
Yoni, what position does your mother have in Sefaria?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot, and I should know the answer to this. She works in their education department, and I forget exactly what her title is now.
But she works for the education department?
Yes.
Oh, interesting, because somebody gave me a whole thing about making bread, a Jewish thing, and I live in a Christian community, and it was the CEO who gave this to me. It's very interesting, and I knew about your mom, but I didn't say anything about her because I wasn't sure it was her, but it was a different woman from the education department who wrote this whole beautiful thing about baking bread and about Judaism and baking bread. So I just wanted to know.
Oh, very nice. Well, I'm a big fan of everyone that works at Safaria. I'm a bigger fan of one in particular, but everyone else will be second to my mom. That's okay. But I'm sure they're all lovely. That might have been Sarah Wolkenfeld, maybe is her name.
No, that wasn't her name.
No?
I'll try to remember for next time.
Yeah,
I have it. So
I'm glad you're enjoying it. And great. And we will see everyone. Yes. So rabbis, we'll do next week, and then we'll take off that Shabbat of Pesach when we're doing Yizkor that morning.
Right.
Great. All right. Well, it was lovely seeing all of you.
Well, thank you for your help again. Appreciate your help.
My pleasure. Bye, everyone.
Rabbi Zwerin, Henny Youngman, 1936.